the point, no? Hey. Hey. I thought, thank you very much. Same rule.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks to them, Lord. Really.
Thanks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are ready to proceed. I just want to welcome you to this very important engagement that we are going to have. I know already that you are looking forward to a wonderful interactive session with the presenters, and the presenters cannot wait. They are already willing to start talking, but I'm going to request that we be mindful of the fact that we are running slightly slow this morning, and I think that we are already 15 minutes slow. Therefore, I will request that as and when we start with proceedings, we have already started. I mean, when the presenters start to do their work, we should note all the questions that we want to engage them on, or all our comments. I will be very liberal in terms of time, but at the same time, we will not allow that all of us be given the opportunity to talk. I know we all want to talk, but unfortunately, time is not on our side. I feel extremely honored myself to have been requested to chair proceedings here. My name is Rotin there. First, I just want to then welcome Dr. Naika to the front and request that Doc must please join me. Thomas Shivolo, please. Sorry. I'm sorry, Bishop. I'm sorry. Is Thomas here with us? It looks like Thomas is not here. Mr. Ngwabo Chabulani. We didn't see him also. I've been looking for him. I couldn't see him. All right. And then it's, oh, you are supposed to be Mr. Ngobo. Okay. Okay, no, at the time when it's opportune, you will introduce yourself properly, ma'am. And thanks very much for standing in for Mr. Ngobo. I'm also going to invite Ms. Geya to immediately join. Dr. Mkhalani, please join us. Sorry. And my brother, Mr. Manuel, please join the team. Right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You then will realize that we are not joined by Mr. Shivolo, but all the other members of the panel are here, and the 20 minutes each will then go to Dr. Naika and then to Mem from TBE. I'm not strict, but we will request that we support one another in terms of ensuring that we deal with this session in such a way that we do not go beyond 20 past 12. And having said that, feel free. This room, blood was flowing here on the floor yesterday. It shows how serious interactions were in this room. And if you are not in this room, please know that you have joined the room that will really call for your very active participation as we proceed. Doc, let me not waste time. Let me then request the audience to please welcome you. The rules have been laid down to us. As soon as we are on the 15th minute, please look at the timekeeper. Then she will indicate that you are on the 15th minute, meaning that you will now start to wrap up. You are most welcome. Please take to the podium.
Thank you. So, good morning, colleagues. So from the time I sent this abstract, well, that's not the abstract, a lot has changed in terms of my work. So I wasn't, thank you. So I was in the Western Cape Education Department, and I left there, but in 2006, I looked at the grade 12 results and the grade 3, 6, and 9 results. And I was quite taken aback by the number of people that get 30% and the number of people that perform poorly. And so I was quite intrigued. So, you know, I have a philosophy that if you are educated in South Africa, then you have a great responsibility to address the challenges. And so I grew up working class. I grew up in an Indian township in Durban. And so when I looked at the results, I realized that the performance of the students were mainly working class that performed poorly. And so it was a very difficult situation for me, because in the bureaucracy, what the HOD says and what the DGD say, and you know, is important, and you've got to follow. So at that stage, I took the decision not to follow. And what I did was I resisted the dominant narrative, and I resisted the political narrative at great cost, because my HOD told me, don't lecture to me about class, but she was quite a liberal human being, and I chose not to follow the instructions of the bureaucracy. So I started studying working class performances across the world, and I looked at the UK. The UK has a number of theorists, and so I looked at I looked at all of them. Down, oh down, okay. So I looked at all of them, many of them, and I looked at what people said in the United States and what people said across the world. And then I linked it to the top management meetings in the education department and the narrative in the education department. And I realized that that we have a middle class narrative in South Africa. And we promote a moral C concept of education. And so you see the number of people that buy German cars, right, outside the education environment and in the education environment. So I would say that it's difficult to estimate the number of working class kids in our country because of the complexity of the definition. But I would say around 60%. Some people put it at 70%. And I believe that the South African education system needs to be fundamentally restructured. And it has to take on board social and cultural capital. And I'll explain that to you just now. So other countries in the world have not solved the working class problem. In the UK, they have many challenges with working class kids. And so most recently, I know we have a colleague here from the UK, and maybe I may misrepresent what happened in the recent riots. But I think the recent riots in the UK, it was working class white people that found it hard to survive in the UK because they were marginalized and alienated by the education system, which is controlled by elitists and people who come out of elite schools. So they expressed the form in violence, and unfortunately, the victims were innocent, like in most cases of violence. So my view, and I'm working with some colleagues, Professor Patte here and Professor Pasha, who I respect a lot at University of South Africa and Indian University. And so when I was at this Indian university, I asked the senior professor, why do you think that people can't see our children are struggling in our education system? And then he said to me, it's because of colonialism. So I listened to him and I thought about it. And I thought that, well, I can express myself freely. I've left the department. So I think a lot of our colleagues in the education departments have unwittingly embraced a colonial narrative. And they have become like the colonials. How can you see so many children not read for meaning in 30 years and say nothing about it? And I could see this because I used to visit the working class townships in the Western Cape. And in the Western Cape, they have a political narrative. And I know the Minister of Education is DA. But the point is, they have a political narrative, and it's about privatization, and it's about pleasing a particular constituency of people who fund them and so on. And working class children are erased from the public debate. And so, because I grew up working class and I grew up in Chatsworth, and I could see all these middle class people doing these things, they take decisions in top management meetings. They don't discuss the violence that's taking place in schools. And so it infuriated me. And so although I was middle class and I didn't drive a German car, but I drove quite a nice car. My working class consciousness, so I decided to study this thing and understand why working class children fail. And so my initial thinking was that you need an alternative pedagogy, but I think it's right, and I'll show you why I think so. And we are working on inclusive education pedagogy, because I think you need to look at the characteristics of working class communities. What are the characteristics of working class communities? And how does that relate to an alternative pedagogy? How do you produce an alternative pedagogy? So if you look at the reading problem, it's about visual tracking, exposure to print, perceptual difficulties, right? Gross motor and fine motor skills. But I'll address those issues in greater detail as we move on. So those are the numbers of the working class children, right? So when you talk about CSTL, And you know, I mean, the presentations and the research and everything that's been done, that needs to be the intellectual tools of the people in the foundation phase curriculum. The foundation phase advisors and the people who work in the foundation phase need to understand the CSL intellectual framework, right? It shouldn't be that it's outsourced, because when it's outsourced, it's special education needs. I've been sitting in the department for a long time. I've been sitting with the DDGs and the chief directors and the directors and the curriculum people and ABET and ECD and so on. There's a clear distinction in education departments. And in our meetings, Tabasila, I see it, that the people in the mainstream think that children who don't succeed is a responsibility of special education, right? But look at the population. 60% of the population live below the poverty line, and a significant proportion of these children can be classified as belonging to working class or low income households. So I do believe, and I still believe, and we're going to do research with these 3 universities on developing this alternative pedagogy, because you know, I realize when you sit in the education department, you become very complacent, right? Because it doesn't affect you. It doesn't affect your children. Your children are Model C schools. They go to UCT and so on. It doesn't affect you. But what affected me was my working class consciousness. You know, I could relate to those people, and I was prepared to take the risks and challenge quite difficult, forceful people, you know, who lead education in the country. And so the next slide, so I told you, look at all the, look at research in the world, right? And this slide is about Paul Willis's, the British sociologist. He did an ethnographic study in Huddersfield in the UK. And this is what he found, right? There's a counter-school culture. Just read this first paragraph here. The counter-school culture and the defiance of the lads. He calls them lads in his book, but they're children, right, boys. There's a cultural resistance, right? So that happens in our schools too. And then because of my own experiences, I realize this is true. I don't know whether I should tell you this, but when I was in Southlands Eye, they told us that the Minister of Indian Education is coming to plant a tree in the school. So I said to myself, you know what, that tree will never be planted because we'll take it out. So we took it out and we threw it on the roof. We threw the carpet on the roof and we threw the tree on the roof. That was our resistance to this kind of Minister of Indian Education in the days of the House of Delegates. And I did a lot of other things, but I joined the boys and the girls to protest against how people were treated. Because where I lived in Unit 1, which is in Chatsworth, there was a neighboring Indian community that was fairly affluent. And so we could see the class differences. And that sparked my class consciousness, right? So this, the self-fulfilling prophecy is something that you're familiar with. Despite the resistance, the kids ultimately ended up in working class jobs. And I fortunately was able to get some education, and I was able to study, and I got a scholarship. I don't know how I managed to do that, but I got there. And then I said, I have to study this problem and make it naked. So that's why I published this book. I'll show you the book now, and I'll read from the book around the solution, I think, that is to this problem that we have. Once again, he speaks about the cultural reproduction of class. So what we're doing in our system is we're reproducing inequality, right? And you know, because we come from apartheid and because we were poor, we are so afraid that we will lose our jobs, we will become poor. I believe this, that we'll become poor and that we'll become alienated, our children will struggle like the way our ancestors struggled. It's a real fear, right? So a significant aspect of Willis' work is on the focus of the role of agency within the broader structural forces. While the lads exercised agency by resisting schooling, their actions were constrained by the wider class system, which limited their opportunities for upward mobility, right? The interplay between culture, education, class reproduction in society, illustrating how working class children often become trapped in a cycle of limited opportunities despite their resistance to authority. So what's the problem? So because of my experiences, I drew these conclusions from Paul Willis's study. No role models, your uncle and aunts are not doctors and lawyers and so on. Poor self-esteem, right? Low self-confidence, limited social capital. I'll speak about social and cultural capital. So I have a question about building social capital for 10 years or 100 years on that advert. I'll talk about it, right? I mean, how do you really build social capital? Poor working class jobs, poor work ethic, socialize in drugs and violence, teenage pregnancy, violence. So when I was a kid, there were 6 shebeens in the area, and we used to drink a lot of alcohol. And then there were a lot of drug dens, and I did smoke ganja. So when I went for my national intelligence test as chief director, the lady in the intelligence test asked me, did you smoke ganja? I said, no. I failed the test. I couldn't tell I smoked. So this thing disappeared. Oh, okay. So yeah, so I failed the national intelligence test, and because I smoked ganja, and I couldn't tell her. I didn't have the courage to tell her. So this is my belief, based on all these facts here, right? More work needs to be done concerning theorizing work. I said this, working class communities, so we can develop an authentic education narrative in South Africa. Once this happens, the education system will have to ensure systemic change and take responsibility for that change. So, you know, the biggest problem in South Africa, and I think in the world, is you have all the sociological knowledge. And all this is in the sociological knowledge. But it's not translated into a pedagogy, right? So when those children come to school in Delft, I took Professor Patte to a school in Anova Park. So we spoke to the principal. He's very cool and calm, you know. 1,000 children in the school. He had only about 95 metrics, I think. One boy in the school was charged for murder, I think, and he was sitting there in the school. A huge dropout rate. I think the dropout rate was about, what was the dropout rate? 75%, right? You know what he said? Then he said, now listen, this is serious stuff, right? This is people's children. And I decided to take this up because their parents don't have a voice. Their grandparents don't have a voice, right? So of that 75% that drop out, most of the boys die before the age of 30. Why? Because they join gangs. So I went to Delft, I went to Khaletsdorp. I should talk to the teachers, talk to the principals, because I had a compassion for them. It was beyond a job for me. So when I went to Khaletsdorp, you know, I was a marathon runner, so that's one way I got rid of drinking alcohol. So I do my 10,000 steps, and I walked in the city, and I saw this truck going down the road, and there were like about 25 to 30 children in the truck. So I asked the lady in the bed and breakfast, who are these people? And she said to me, well, they are working, their parents work on they work on the wine farms. So you know that nice wine you drink and you buy in Pick n Pay and so on? It's coming from there. And those children are doing it. Then it occurred to me that those children are doing what their great-grandparents did 150 years ago. There are no secondary schools in the area because of apartheid, and we've been illiterate that we've done nothing about it, right? And so I realized that these children are slaves, like many children in the Western Cape, in Delft, in Khayelitsha, in Langa. And so I decided to write this book, Education in the Working Class is All for Inclusive System. And I did it because I thought that I need to expose this thing, right? Okay, I stayed in the education department for a long time. I studied the system. I studied all these middle class people. I engaged with them. I had to intellectually uh, uh, become more sophisticated intellectually, so I can engage them, fight them, and beat them at their own debates. And I did that, right? But I can tell you we have a serious working class problem in South Africa. And we have, and that Indian professor who told me that we have these new colonials, they are rampant all over the system and in different colors, right? And they are what we call, many of them, I can say this because I've left the department, many of them are neoliberal vessels and they are colonial clowns, right? It's a problem. So let me just go back here. 5 minutes more. Okay, if you give me 5 minutes more. So Diane Gray is the British sociologist. She, I think you need to read up her stuff. She's a beautiful. She's got a very good narrative. But she talks about the middle class and the working class, and she says that we are reproducing the social inequalities like we do in the Western Cape. When you arrive there and you see the beautiful mountain trees and so on, drive past the airport and you'll see how people live. So she continues to talk about the psychological fitting in, how children are struggling in the townships, how children are deprived, and the DA's policy, although the national minister is DA, she said that the neoliberal education policies that the DA follows, such as school choice and privatization, have worsened education inequality by benefiting those with more resources and further marginalizing working class children. So that's the Model C. That's the Model C schooling concept, right? And then I think another person who's done a lot of good work is Pierre Bourdieu. He speaks about embodied cultural capital, internalized cultural dispositions, such as language, manners, and taste, I think. And he speaks about objectified cultural capital. It's very interesting. Institutionalized cultural capital. And I think you need to look at his work if you want to understand what's happening in our schools. So how do we solve the problem, right? So I know I've got 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read from my book, The Advice I Give to the Western Cape Education Department. So I contextualize my book in the Western Cape Education Department because I think it's a huge problem. It's a colonial department. It's a neoliberal department. And so I've got like 5 points I want to make that I will read to you. I've got about 20 points, but I'll read 5. We'll give you time to read 5 points. So I say, this is what I say. Does anybody have reading glasses? Does anybody have reading glasses?
Not really. I thought it's reading glasses.
So let me just read this point because I don't have much time. I just want to read this thing quickly to you. So I say this is what the Western Cape Education Department should do and what the National Education Department should do and all the other provinces. Develop a framework for the Western Cape education system with a view to addressing inequality by acknowledging the current system is in favor of a Model C system and that the current service delivery reproduces the status quo. Develop a conceptual framework on the importance of social and emotional learning. Highlight the argument, deficit on cultural capital in working class communities as a barrier to academic success. With all the bureaucrats in the system, in the national department and the provinces, define cultural capital, discuss how a deficit in these areas can impede progress in education, and the impediments of progress as a result of cultural capital. Then introduce the concept of SEL, highlight its significance in addressing the identified impediments in primary and secondary schools, especially in working class schools. Retrain all circuit managers and head office staff so that they can have a clear understanding of the relevance of SEL. That's the 5 points. But I've got like about 13 points that you can look at. I've got this book for sale. You can contact me if you want a copy. But I just want to say, yo, these glasses are strong. So, so I just want to say, colleagues, you know what? Finally, I think you have a branded narrative in education in South Africa. It's not an authentic education narrative. It is the press that covers up. How can you cover up the failure and the drugs and the alienation of children in schools across a province and have glossy magazines that say this and say that and say that? It's false, right? So that my purpose when I came here today was to tell you this. I'm happy I told you this, and I hope we can advance this struggle for kids. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. Let's welcome Kalisile, and I'm going to ask that you introduce yourself and indicate to them how you are related to us. Your 20 minutes has just started.
Thank you, Doc. I'm Tabisile. I'm from the Department of Basic Education under the directorate called Inclusive Education. Still not sure why we call that, but that's just what we are. Is the president? Okay, my director is chairing interview for National Teachers Awards. So he asked me to come and present on his behalf. He was a bit reluctant to ask me because he knows when this topic comes up, I tend to get carried away. The water. Okay, but I'll try and stick to the script. So I'll be kind of reading. But he also said I must just thank the Chief Directorate that runs the program of care and support for teaching and learning. Because out of all the programs, the directorates in the, or chief directorates in the Department of Education, this is one branch where he doesn't have to literally beg for inclusion. So Liko, if you're here, and the team, and Dr. Watson, he is saying thank you so much. Okay, he's up for the next one. Okay. That's the heading of his presentation: construction, rationalization, resistance, transformation of leadership cultures. A reflection on the implementation of inclusive education in South Africa. These are hectic terms: construction, rationalization, resistance, and transformation. So I'm hoping in the presentation you will find a space where he is articulating this. This is the presentation outline. I'm not going to go through each line because I'm going to be talking through it, through each and every point. As an introduction, just a quick reminder that in the sector, we are there to provide an environment where everyone will have access to lifelong learning, education, and learning opportunities. Then access to these opportunities is thus an institutional imperative that must be actualized in order to enable all citizens to improve quality. I think I've pressed by mistake. No, I haven't. This one we debated, and I told him I'm going to change it, the third bullet, inclusive education. And we agreed. Because so long as we call inclusive education will always be on the sideline and remain then afterthought. But if you change the term slightly and say an inclusive education system, already there is a shift, because it's saying all of us, wherever you are, you have a responsibility because we are creating a system. So an inclusive education system offers a mechanism through which the sector can achieve this long-lasting a vastly better development prospect for all children, especially those with disabilities, because I also like the theme of the conference, which is learning poverty. Because these are the kids that are really experiencing learning poverty. If you look at the indicators in the World Bank of learning poverty, there is 2. The first one is participation. The second one is obviously the reading. Large number of these kids don't get to participate because they are not even there to participate. Some that are there, sitting in the classroom, they are not participating. So we've made significant progress in ensuring children with disabilities can enjoy uninhibited access to this right to education. However, challenges remain, as we are aware, in the system. Then he said we must touch on the importance of leadership in education reform. Leadership plays a pivotal role in shaping the direction and effectiveness of an education system. Effective leadership is crucial for change, we all know that, particularly in the context of educational reform, where we are faced with systemic challenges that needs to be addressed comprehensively. In South Africa, like in any other place in the world, leadership is a key factor in success of inclusive education initiatives. And when we talk leadership, we're not just talking leadership we mean leadership in the whole sector. Political, administrative, at all levels. Then leadership cultures, and I heard Sikamoni speaking about it, and it resonates with this. It refers to a collective way leaders think, behave, and interact with an organization. And it encompasses the shared values, beliefs, norms that shape how leadership is exercised. It's just giving us an example there. The kind of leadership that has completely kind of like excluded a whole range of children. In school leadership culture influences decision-making, communication style, how you resolve conflicts, and basically the overall climate of the institution. And it's not just about an individual's trait or individual leader's traits. It's about shared practices and expectations that define how leadership roles are exercised and fulfilled. And the shared practices there is critical, because even the sector, if the different leaderships at different levels, if we don't have a shared values and shared expectations, this we will see the exclusion that we see. Different dimensions of leadership cultures are core principles that guide leaders' actions, such as commitment to equity, inclusion, and educational excellence. Typical ways in which leaders interact with the school community, including teachers, the learners, and the broader community. They also established routines and procedures that reflect and reinforce the leadership cultures, such as how meetings are conducted, how decisions are made, and so forth and so forth. So the importance of leadership cultures in education. I think in the next slide we said it affects the school climate, which in turn influence learning outcomes, teacher satisfaction, and the community involvement. For instance, a positive leadership culture promotes collaboration, trust, a shared commitment to the school's mission and vision, creating a conducive environment for learning and growth. Leadership cultures that shape priorities and focus on areas of a school. It determines how resources are distributed, and how they are allocated and how they are deployed to give expression to the constitutional right of everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone, all the people that we other. In schools with strong leadership culture that values inclusivity, efforts are made to ensure that all learners, including those experiencing barriers and othering, are supported to succeed academically and socially. On the other hand, a leadership culture that is resistant to change, and we've got many like that, are focused solely on maintaining the status quo, which can hinder the adoption of innovative practices and the pursuit of equity in education, resulting in exclusion of all learners, which, as Sigamoni said, whose cultural codes do not match the dominant culture. Challenges in shaping leadership cultures. Leadership cultures are often deeply entrenched, shaped by historical, cultural, religious, you name it, societal norms, and personalities of influential leaders. Changing these cultures, they really require a conscious, intentional effort and a clear vision of the desired outcomes. And by the way, that clear vision everyone needs to buy to that vision. If we don't buy to that vision, we will see what we currently experience. So resistance to change can be a significant barrier, particularly when there is lack of alignment between the school leadership culture and the goals of inclusive education, or of an education system that is inclusive. Incoherent understanding of the constitutional mandate of basic education can also undermine the rights of learners. He asked me to relate a story where he had a meeting with the senior managers and they were all asked, I think strategic planning was asking, so what's our mandate as the sector? And everyone came with different things in terms of the mandate. And not a single official among that meeting went to Section 27 of the Constitution, which is really, that's where we all get our mandate. So you can already see, if we don't have one goal, we're all going to walk in different directions. Other challenges in shaping leadership culture is path dependency. Can challenge reform. We see this when we're trying to create an inclusive education system. When policy decisions that were made in the past create a specific trajectory or lock-in effect for current policies, I think Sigamoni illustrated it nicely when he spoke about special needs education. So we're all singing inclusive education, then you go to the practices. You find it's special needs education because there's just deep-seated cultural, religious thing where we just got stuck. That's the example I've just given. For an example, a focus in special education as a mechanism for providing education for learners experiencing barriers may impose a path on the introduction of an inclusive education system. So now he's turning into leadership cultures and inclusive education. So he's saying for an education system to be inclusive, then be successful, the leadership culture must embrace diversity and be committed to the principle that every learner, and stressing every learner, deserves an opportunity to learn in a supportive environment. In school cultures, in schools with culture of inclusivity, the fundamental belief is that every learner matters regardless of their background, abilities, and challenges. This school operates on a principle that all learners have an inherent right to education, and their unique needs and potentials must be acknowledged and supported. Leadership cultures in South African schools. In many schools, leadership cultures have been influenced by the country's complex history of exclusion, which also comes from Calvinist, the religious thing and all sorts of things, including obviously the legacy of apartheid, which has resulted in deeply rooted inequalities and divisions that also Sigamoni spoke about. The shift towards a more inclusive, equitable education system requires transformation in leadership cultures, moving away from exclusionary practices towards a focus on diversity and inclusion. Some schools have successfully fostered this culture, promotes inclusive education, and we've witnessed, in fact, in our last meeting with principals, we have embraced this despite the powers that are above them resisting it. So we need more of these schools to showcase the good practices that can reshape the cultures and address the challenges of learning poverty. Leaders at all levels of the sectors must articulate and enforce a compelling vision for inclusive education, where all learners have access, equitable access to opportunities required to succeed. Leaders must understand that transforming education system to be more inclusive requires dedication, commitment, focus, resilience. This means leaders must stay committed to the vision, even in the face of challenges and resistance. Leaders must understand the importance of collaboration and build partnership. Leaders must be aware of the cultural, historic, and social context that influence education and be sensitive to the unique needs of the different communities, as Sigamoni has already said, in the working class communities. Leaders must understand that inclusive education often requires innovative solutions to complex problems. For instance, they must understand change can be met with resistance, especially if that change is challenging deeply ingrained practices. Shouldn't give up easily to uproot exclusion and install inclusivity. And they must rely on data and research to guide their decision about inclusive education. This includes collecting and analyzing data on learning outcomes, identifying gaps, and using these to inform policy and practice. Leaders must advocate for policies that support inclusive education. Leaders must ensure that resources, whether financial or otherwise, are allocated in a way that support inclusive education. Advocate for funding to ensure that this is used effectively. Thank you. That was the end.
Well, thank you for being attentive, ladies and gentlemen. I want to apologize to our participants who are on the online platform. And I should actually have introduced Ms. Nontutuzelo earlier, but I don't know why I was reliant on what is here, only to be told that no, what you are having there is a draft. And it does look like there were changes that were made finally, which are now in this booklet that you have been given. And I did not follow the booklet, but I'm hopeful that Ms. Ngubane, you are able to hear me, and I'm very sorry that I did not call you before my colleague from DBE. But we are with you now, and we have received queries from our colleagues on the platform, on the virtual platform, who are indicating that when we speak, we don't bring the mic closer to the mouth, and they are struggling to hear us. So those who are coming to speak after me, please make sure that the mic is much nearer and closer to the mouth, so that our colleagues on the virtual platform are able to hear each and every single word that we are saying. Ms. Ngubane, can you hear us?
Yes, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Chair. I could not capture your name. I don't know if you can hear me.
Loud and clear. And they are indicating to me that they are listening to you. They want you to proceed.
Thank you. Let me thank the opportunity. I know when you are presenting online and there's a vibe in the room, you tend to be forgotten, but it is not a bad thing. It means that we are all on point. Let me introduce myself. I am Nontutu Zelo. You can call me Ndutu Ngubane. I work as a lecturer at Walter Sisulu University. I'm also the faculty chair for community engagement and internationalization projects. My presentation is I only have 14 slides, but the first one is there already. I'm introducing to you a concept that always affects care and support for teaching and learning. I am zooming on a study that I conducted on attitudes, debates, and dilemmas, looking at corporal punishment and future teachers. The presentation is twofold. Firstly, in number one, I'm going to give a brief overview of the research study, and then I'll highlight the dilemmas, the debates, and the attitudes. And then I'll present how do we move now from this view of corporal punishment towards caring schools, looking at teacher development and transformative leadership in the space of creating care and support for teaching and learning. Slide number 3. The study investigated attitudes of student teachers towards using corporal punishment. The background is that being a lecturer at Walter Sisulu University, we send out our student teachers to go and do teaching practice. And I have observed as common practice that in schools, teachers are still using corporal punishment, despite the 1996 illegality of its declaration. And through social media, we have all observed that the ugly head of corporal punishment is rising up. And it's becoming more violent now because it is impacted by social violence that exists in our society. Therefore, the study looked at what do we understand about the realities of corporal punishment? How is society dealing with corporal punishment? How are the schools dealing with corporal punishment? What is the reality of corporal punishment now inside the classroom? If we still have corporal punishment resurfacing and violence in schools accommodating that. So what are the new elements of this reality of corporal punishment? Remember, there are projects, there are programs that are funded, that are looking at ending all of corporal punishment globally. There is a drive for that. But despite the drive, in many countries, there is still a record that violence in the form of corporal punishment exists in schools. So what does it say about what does this mean to care and support giving if the caregivers are still alive and inclined and even tempted to consider corporal punishment? The study was of an interpretivist paradigm. I used a mixed method approach. I sampled a class of final year PGCE students. The class size was 120, and I used questionnaires, focus groups, and semi-structured interviews. And the findings in summary, the first finding is amazing because there is a positive attitude towards using corporal punishment as a discipline strategy despite the ban. the study find out that in the mentor that is effected in the schools, the power of school mentors over student teachers influencing the use of corporal punishment. Number 3, the findings show that there is vulnerability of student teachers due to inadequate training. And this was all underpinned by 2 theories. That is the theoretical framework now. I used Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory and also the theory of planned behavior, which actually zoom into the individual dimension of an individual who is in a situation and is affected by other environmental stages, the mesosystemic environmental influence, the microsystemic environmental influence that actually determines the types of relationships that should exist within a context, and also what that individual brings in terms of the subjective norm. What is socially accepted where I am? What am I bringing as a person into the situation that is now perceived behavior? So it means that and to consider assessment of out and activity context. Our teachers to actually understand the personal dimensions that they bring into the bi-directional relationship between a teacher and a student space of dealing with disruptive behavior. Let me continue now and look at I am not everything that the study covered into those to the platform. The study presented this dilemma. 75.4% of student teachers indicated that they actually use punishment during teaching practice, despite the ban. And they did not do this in hiding. They use corporal punishment in front of their mentor teacher. And this concludes that mentoring received by student teachers is not aligned to the policies that govern learner discipline because of the influential power of the mentors. And this speaks directly to what has been alluded to yesterday, Ukutim, wellness within a school environment is also determined by the individual influences and experiences that are brought about by strong cultural inclinations, beliefs, and values. So that whatever systematic arrangement is within the school, whatever function is presented in the school, culture, society, norms, values are actually affecting the system that runs the school. In the study, the participants, the 120 participants, were made to respond to these 3 statements. One, they had to indicate, like, I am confident that I will have no discipline problems in my class. I am somewhat anxious about how I will cope with discipline in my classes. I am afraid that it will be difficult for me to maintain discipline in my classes. And you can see that by the indication of the stats, 58% of the student teachers that were trained in that block of PGCE students indicated that they were anxious about how they would deal with disruptive behavior within the classroom. And that speaks to their state of readiness, the attributes that they bring to the classrooms, and also their state of understanding the personal dimension and the skills and the knowledge and the abilities that they can be able to tap in to be able to deal with discipline issues. During the focus groups, there was a big debate on who is responsible to deal with learner disruptive behavior. Is it the sole responsibility of the school? That is the management the teachers, and the learners themselves, who must take responsibility. And the second debate that ensued was, are universities adequately training future teachers for authentic school context with relevant graduate achievements? We can see the dynamics of learner discipline. We can see the change of the policy directives when we are trying to implement now within the classroom. So these issues are still debatable because my study is not conclusive because I only zoomed on 120 students in one university. So it would be not right to actually generalize. The other interesting fact is the students, when I gave them the questionnaires, they were asked to indicate their agreeable feeling towards this statement. Corporal punishment should be used as a last resort when all other methods of discipline have failed. And 43.6% of the students strongly agreed with the statement that corporal punishment should be used as a last resort. Remember, this practice has been declared illegal in 1996. So what are the current attitudes? There is a dilemma. The management of the school, in the focus group discussion, this emanated. The management of the school had changed. This is now a contribution by one of the participants in the focus group discussion. He says the management of the school had changed and new rules were being applied. One of these being that corporal punishment must not be used in the school. This participant stated that there is now chaos in the school and the pass rate performance has suddenly dropped because there is no way of controlling the learners. So what is the management of the school doing about trying to align to the policy? What mechanisms are there to use, to tap on, so that there is no chaos, the pass rate is actually maintained without using corporal punishment? Perhaps these are the reasons why we always we observe through evident research, through observation, when we pass by schools, that you can actually see that corporal punishment is still widely used. Even when you read these documents, you can that some schools are in trouble, have been using corporal punishment as part of the discipline system within their schools, and these cases always escalate. Number two, one of the participants claimed that as a student teacher, I so much wanted to use corporal punishment, honestly, because in the schools it is used, but the law does not allow it. But deep down, you want to use it. You can feel the dilemma, the confusion that is brought by the environment that this student teacher is placed in and the knowledge that is taught at university, and the struggle now to bring both so that we create a care and support environment within the school. And the last one said, yo, that's an interaction is closer. Now, I hate corporal punishment with all my heart. Do you know that a moment of anger, proving your power, can change impilo yomntu? Impilo yomntu means a person's life. This student was actually, this participant was against using corporal punishment, and he further said he made a decision when he was placed in that particular school. Corporal punishment was used, and he was even made to carry a stick around the school just to be respected by the students. But he claimed that I stayed in the belief that I don't like corporal punishment because I might be inflicting pain to a student that is challenged already. Towards conclusion now, Chair, yes. Now, out of the experience that I have brought about, for teacher development and support towards caring schools, I believe that teachers are engines in schools. So eliminating vulnerabilities and promoting their well-being is key to care and support for teaching and learning. And then who must take responsibility? I know now we are speaking of many approaches. The presentations here have been so informative, but the school leadership structure must take a lead in this. The aligned reflection and self-awareness by the managers of the school. If you are managing a school, to be a transformative leader means you take a step back and you align your reflection and be self-aware. What is it as a leader that I am bringing to the school so that I actually deal with the next point, promoting wellness, so that when we speak care and support coming from the space of leadership, we understand that authentic leadership positions one to be a change agent. And if you don't transform your reflections and you are not aware of the power vested in you, then the authenticity in the leadership does not speak to the ideals that are actually presented in this platform. Most importantly is stakeholder engagement and collaboration. This must be priority in the school leadership platforms, from policy making to implementation in this classroom, and even maintaining the ethos of the school culture. Stakeholder engagement is key. And also, leaders in schools must understand the role of multidisciplinarity and interdependence. There are neighboring schools, and I've never been exposed in the neighboring schools actually share a community of practice so that there is multidisciplinarity and interdependence. And also tapping on those who are already positioned to deal with some challenges. Let's say, for instance, teenage pregnancy. We've got clinics around our communities, but now do we engage them intentionally to allow multidisciplinarity through stakeholder engagement? That is a question. School leadership structures must show the following values: humility about the problems, a spirit of resilience in the previous presentations, activity that change is possible and we have power to change the trajectory. It must start from the voice in the school context. That speaks to the school governing council and bodies, and also the board of directors in the schools. And lastly, the universities, there is a component that is called community engagement. Universities need to be community engaged institutions of higher learning. I always feel that universities are sometimes so detached from the communities and the realities in schools because we are so research focused. So a multimodal, multi-pronged approach towards creating and safe schools is very important. And also we write brilliant research papers, but the recommendations are always archived in the libraries. Are our recommendations actionable? Action research, participatory research, problem-solving research. That is the space that we need to indulge in so that our research does make sense at school level. And also the review of work integrated learning, because the study was based on student teacher. Is it enough to place a student for 4 weeks in a school and then you say that that experience summarizes or incorporates all that the student should learn in a school environment? Maybe a policy that reviews the duration of the placements in schools would actually assist in making sure that the graduates are actually put to test and are actually made to align with the school environments, having had a great exposure. In other countries overseas, they actually have 3-year placements and 1-year placements, and they do not have discipline problems as this one. And lastly, develop growth opportunities through short learning programs, through workshops for emotional and cross-cultural intelligence. These issues are important because an emotional intelligent educator in a classroom is able to deal with challenges, well equipped with understanding the power, the force of influence that actually stabilizes whatever disruptive behavior or whatever challenge or systematic barrier exists within a situation.
Wow.
And cross-cultural intelligence is also important because racism that is shown now in multimedia is due to the lack of cross-cultural intelligence that is accommodating racist behaviors, that is also taking us back now as a country to issues that we think that we have dealt with.
Wow, that's so incisive. And thank you so much. I know that you still
Thank
want to go
you.
to your last slide.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the wonderful.
That is my slide.
I wanted actually to interject you by using the exclamation of one of your participants. Iyo. Wow. You know, okay, maybe before I request the audience to comment, let me quickly request the boss of the teachers to make a comment and the other boss of the other teachers to also make a comment. We are very fortunate to have Ms. Ella Mokhalane from the South African Council for Educators along here with us, and also Mr. Basil Manuel from NAPTOSA. I'm going to request that you just make 2 minutes comments, and then we'll then request my audience to interact. Please, those colleagues who are with us on the virtual platform, don't go away, because I am going to request that you make your final comments in 15 minutes time from now. Ms.
No, thank you very much, Program Director, and good morning to the colleagues. Yeah, there's too much that I had to say, but in the interest of time and the 2 minutes, one of the key issues that I want to continue to raise is that all of us within the teaching profession, teachers in particular, have got a duty of care. That's the first principle. And therefore, the do not harm principle also goes along with the whole issue of duty of care. However, be that it is may, we still continue to, yes, have corporal punishment. We still have to you still have issues around. This one is even a nightmare. It gives me a nightmare every day. I can't sleep because of it. Issues of sexual harassment, sexual abuse. Sexual assault is number one. Men, any opportunity, and I'm saying men because it's 99.5 something percent, every opportunity that they grab, they grab the child. It doesn't matter where. And therefore, those issues continue to be with us. And also the issue that we are not speaking about, the issue of the LGBTQI Q+ in the schools where our teachers are still being seen as not human, and also our children, but the teachers even more being denied promotions, which is bad, because they belong to this community, and it's really becoming, and even taking a hot soup and pour onto a learner because he's gay. Those are I'm talking about real cases that I'm having. And we just said, I'm glad she spoke about student teachers, because we are beginning to have issues with student teachers. We've got 2 learners that committed suicide because of being labeled as gays and whatever, lesbians by those student teachers. And therefore, one of the things that we've done was to develop professional teaching standards and values of the profession. And we are moving towards having those standards because they are rights-based. They are looking into social cohesion, social justice issues. And we are saying, we said to the Department of Higher Education and Training, when we come to the curriculum and issues of initial teacher training and also continuing professional development, those standards shall be in the Mr. TEC, which is minimum requirements for teacher education qualifications, the policy. And when it gets finalized, because the review will be done and finalized one day, because we're still being reviewed, the competencies and graduates attributes that we want to see from our student teachers that are being trained should be informed by those 10 standards. And 3 or 4 of them are dealing with care and support issues within the teaching and learning working environment. But the other issue is that we are moving towards dealing with issues of quality. Systems of quality assurance within the higher education sector has been focusing more on the academic aspects. So we're saying we now have a joint accreditation with Council on Higher Education to say, these are the things from a professional perspective, the issues that we are raising, that should be, they are must. If those universities are not adhering, then it's fine, we would not register their teachers, prospective teachers. They can claim autonomy, they can claim whatever, we will claim our right to register or not to register. So the last one, leadership. Leadership issues that have been raised, I'm glad they were, but we expect too much from our principals in schools without supporting them. Continuing professional development is happening to a certain extent to the ordinary teachers in schools. However, the school management teams from your heads of departments, deputy principals, I'm not even sure deputies understand what their rules are, including the principals. I have about 21 female leaders in schools that are writing their experiences of gender-based violence, of their rights not being protected, and therefore that hampers everything else that you are talking about. For the past 2 days, you can say whatever that you want, but if we don't have that leadership within the school being taken care of, then it becomes a futile exercise. We are launching the book finally. It's a written book by teachers for teachers and female teachers of principals for that matter. We are launching it during the Teachers Month, Basil. Finally, they've written it. It's short stories of their own experiences. And it's part of emancipation. It's themselves empowering themselves and saying, this is what we want to do. Yeah, I know you're going to kill me, so let me leave it at that for now.
There's a liberal understanding of 2 minutes. However, ladies and gentlemen, I'll try. It's extremely difficult to comment. There's so much has been said, but I will not go into the same areas as Ella, because I think she's covered it more than sufficiently. I just want to focus for a minute on Sigamani's delivery and paper. And of course, he spoke a lot about the Western Cape. And sometimes we get caught up in thinking that this must only pertain to the Western Cape. Ladies and gentlemen, let's just debunk certain myths about what is happening in the country and how teaching happens in the country and how management happens in the country. First of all, why are principals not being as transformative as we think they should be? Why are the people within the department even not being as transformative as we think they should be? When we are all chasing one thing, and it is the matric result, to hell with the rest type of thing, we subject our children to extra classes, so much so because teachers are getting paid for these extra classes. You may not be aware. They're staying absent during the week and teaching their very lessons over the weekend and at night. And then it goes further. I'm a parent of 3 grown children, so it's not impacting my life. But do you really want your child sleeping in a classroom in the midst of a few hundred children whose hormones are running rampant? You were in matric too, and you know what you were like when you were there. And if this is the only important thing, how do we ever get Sigamani to start focusing on neoliberalism and the like? Because we've placed all our attention on the end. As a result, The bottom has suffered. Foundation phase, reading. Even though we talk about reading, and whenever we get these results coming out and we beat our breasts and we hold our heads and bow our heads in shame, we don't do anything about it. How many, I ask, of every one of the provinces sitting here and officials who may be here, how many provinces have taken the time to train those teachers that number in their thousands who are teaching out of alignment? They've never been trained for the foundation phase. They've never taught reading. I was a principal of a primary school for 18 years. And I can tell you that my grade 4 teachers couldn't teach reading because it's a specialist thing. Now, with so many teachers who've been trained for the senior phase and the FET phases, etc., teaching in the primary school and teaching in the junior primary, not because of choice, but because that was the only post available, and the very principal needed a teacher, and nobody trains them. But we expect a different outcome. And this is the type of disjuncture that we have. I want to thank the people who've presented, and I'm sorry, I've got so much to say about so many things here. I've written another book, Sigamani, about this, and also not to forget Jabulani's presentation here at the end. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, when your focus is so distracted, and you can't have anybody take you off from this distraction that is now your primary focus. You beat the children up if they misbehave. And our principals and our teachers are at wit's end because, of course, they don't have sufficient guidance. They honestly don't. We fight with teachers because I don't want to represent somebody who has injured another mother's child. That's my reality. It becomes even worse when it borders on almost a hate crime type of thing, because the child has been differently identified. The child is targeted, etc. Those are our realities. CSTL, last word. I just want him, I'm worried about the carpet more than anything else, pacing there. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not true that CSTL is not in the schools. There have been always people that cared. There have always been people that have done things and gone beyond the call of the ordinary duty. There are many of you sitting here that if it weren't for somebody who gave special attention, special care, special just interest, you wouldn't be sitting here today. So it is there. However, we are not seeing the impact broadly that ought to be there. I'm just handing it over because you're giving me an ugly look.
Sorry. I feel so guilty because I know what the panelists went through preparing for this occasion, ladies and gentlemen. But there's quite a lot that can be said. It's just that we don't have time, really. We are left with 5 minutes. I'm going to request one comment from this side, one comment from this side. I've identified, I'm so sorry, I've identified that guy. He's from the northwest, he's far from here. And then, thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Just hearing about corporal punishment and all the other problems that are happening in the schools raises the question, and I don't want to make excuses for teachers for this. What is the discipline policy of the department? What alternatives have been given to teachers? I've asked many principals, what are you doing for discipline? What do you do? They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So if we are not investing in even training the leadership on how to have a disciplined school, I don't know how we expect teachers to navigate this. And as for about the results and care for the children and pushing matric results, In certain provinces that are superstar provinces in the country, because they're performing so well in the matric results, children start school on the 26th of December. Children go out of school daily at 9 o'clock at night in the townships. That's the level of care.
Right, we have just consulted, sorry, sir, I'm going to favor you and yourself and the last person of the side. Then it will mean that you are women. I really appreciate you. It's fine. Just I'm waiting to take all the men from
Good morning. Thank you for favoring me. My name is Opa Budibe from the Gauteng Department of Education. I've got two questions. Are we ever going to review the policy of producing teachers via universities, especially foundation phase? Because in my view, you don't need a university degree to teach foundation phase. We had teacher training colleges that did an excellent job, but we decided to close them. Yeah. No, then the second question is where, first, let me appreciate that last analysis, Dr. Neka. However, I want to ask a question. If this working class you are talking about is disaggregated, or is it a whole mass, homogeneous mass? Because the term working may mean that everybody is employed. And in the South African context, we've got a large unemployed working class, one. By dwelling types, we also have those who are in informal settlement and those who are in some kind of formal structure. And the children coming from those backgrounds will not be the same. And their challenges will also not be the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc, for favoring the Northwest. My name is Josiah Ramushi from a primary school in Klepgat in Konjane, primary school. I'm a principal. And I'm glad that I've had so many aspects that were being dealt with that relates to, favoring teachers. One, my issue is with qualifications, especially from the tertiary institutions, especially your PGCE. Your normal teachers that we have in schools who are PGC graduates are actually not teachers, in my view. Those are some of the people who had, a dream of being an accountant and. And in the absence of finding a job, teaching was their last option. And we are left with them as principals. I just want to make that point. And secondly, is when you talk care and support, your infrastructure as an institution, as a department, does it really respond to care and support? Your minimum norms and standards of an institution, do you have something that you can say when a learner wants to talk to a teacher about something, or a teacher wants to talk to a principal about something, can we get out of the comfort zone of the principal and go to that particular room, which is specially made? We are talking people reporting your GBV and in police stations. We have made it comfortable in police stations. What about in schools? And I'm making this reference because there's a department called Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. If you go into that building, you start to realize that you want to go to work every day. But we want to go to schools every day as teachers. The last one, before that when we do the mindset shift. No, it's 30 seconds. Yeah. The mindset shift in terms of how we monitor our schools. Can we include CSTL as an item for monitoring, whether on a quarterly or on a monthly basis? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
we just recently get off August month, so. Colleagues, I have a question, and this question is to all of us, but I think Ndademo from the union side may be, better placed to respond to it. My question is, what is the possibility of us using ID numbers versus SACE numbers when we deal with the transgressions of educators? And the reason I'm asking this is for obvious reasons, and all of us are aware that they transgressed in Gauteng and they resurface in Free State. And the modus operandi continues. And I am of the opinion that if we get to a point of using ID numbers vis-a-vis SACE numbers, it could help us to a great extent. Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing me. And when he was talking about having a teacher in class who could not teach properly the reading, is very upsetting, whereby we are talking and sitting with the higher unemployment of the teachers. And not only that, there are some other teachers who are capable of being in the class and teaching, the same class, the junior one, but because they are maybe foreign national or the status that they're having, they are not allowed to care for the children in the class. If only they can consider, for the sake of the children, in the time being, allow all those who are able to teach, because this is the foundation that we are talking about. Move out of the box, at least give the space for those who can be able and give a better education. Thank you.
We've agreed here that I'll just pass it on and everybody will have their turn. And, but we are not going to cross-pollinate, so to speak. Just simply about the two things that I think were directed to me. The first of all, just about the disciplinary procedure and the use of SACE numbers and people popping up elsewhere. In fact, it has become much more difficult now for people to commit an offense in one province and arise in another because of the Purcell system being used correctly. Because if a province blocks on Purcell, another province can't open it. And so the person will come there unless they adopt a new name and everything. But I'll talk more outside this about the number story. Insofar as teachers that are not trained, I don't want to create the wrong impression. Some of these are good salt of the earth people trying their best under very, very difficult circumstances. Let me make that clear. But I take the point that sometimes we need to look harder for the people who are best suited to the job.
Thank you very much. I think many of the questions were more in a form, they came in a form of a comment, and I'm not going to respond to that. Issue of PGCE, I think you should be aware that the Council on Higher Education will be conducting a review of both BEd and PGCE. And I think it's an opportune time for us to avail ourselves and be seen, stand up and raise our hands in terms of whatever issues that we want to deal with. I'm just want to deal with that. And there are also standards that are going to be used to review those qualifications. We've been given an opportunity. I'm not sure if we grabbed it in terms of commenting at that level so that we can deal with the issues accordingly. In that, I agree with you. Issues of corporal punishment, teachers are between a rock and a hard place in terms of the kind of issues. It's overcrowding, it's ill discipline, it's learners also practicing violence against teachers, which is something that we need to be looking at. We have a project that we're running on teachers' rights, responsibilities, and safety. And it's something that we're going to heighten in terms of looking into the campaign of working on that. But also it's about how do we then have a policy or a framework, a national policy framework. I know we've got safety and security document, but I'm saying at a policy level, legislative level, so that the issues, the balancing of the rights between the learner from a justice perspective, proportionality principles to say when you are met with this problem, how do you deal with it from a teacher who's been hurt by a learner traumatized you? So that teacher who was using on social media, the chairs and whatever, because the learner started. But at the end of the day, me and you, Dr. Mvula, from your own capacity as the Western Cape Department, you're going to find that teacher guilty because of reacting. But the work that we're doing is saying, how do we capacitate teachers to make sure that when they're confronted with this kind of situations, they act in a manner that will not harm them, but still engage Justice Department, because the Justice Act then come and protect them, the kids and all that. So the balancing act, it's something that we need to work on. Thanks.
So there's just one issue you raised. You know, I mean, the class is not a homogeneous issue, but just think about this, right? That we have curriculum training in our country, and the name Bernstein is not mentioned. Bordeaux is not mentioned. Bowles and Ginges is not mentioned. You don't know where this narrative is being drawn from, because all of them say schools reproduce the status quo. But so I was in India in the beginning of July, and so I was driving in Bangalore I drove for about 4 hours, and it's like an elite area, very poor area, and then the poor areas are like differentiated as well, because it's like some semi-structured, unstructured, I don't know how you describe them. But that's what we have to tackle. If we don't tackle that, if we don't take care of these children, if we don't link a pedagogy to these children, we don't have any hope, right? That's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to say this thing in a public space, because it's just unacceptable. Thank you.
Wow. Please clap hands for all of us and for all of you. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, I think finally what we need to agree on is that all of us must go back and we must all become transformative leaders and become game changers. From all that has been said, let's take something from what has been said, go utilize it in your institutions, or throw away what you don't need. Continue to look at how the institution is running and how best we can improve, and then continue to share information that is there. Continue to look at various communities that we live with, and also learn from what they are doing. It is very interesting if you're listening to all these colleagues and from all your comments, you will realize that actually we are one. We are basically saying the same thing. We all want this country to go to one direction, but it does differ in terms of how we are approaching everything. If my colleague from the Northwest is saying, no, what we need is that we must have teachers who were meant to become teachers, and as a result, who do not come to teaching as a last resort. I'm sure what he means actually is that it may happen that all those who had meant to study other things are not necessarily supposed to be with us. But he does not necessarily exclude the fact that those people may also be very good, and if we develop and support them, they can assist us to ensure that learners perform. So having said that, I think that all these colleagues have summarized what should be said by the chair. I want to thank all of you, because if we talk about, for instance, the issue of ill discipline of learners and so on, you will realize we just scratching the surface. Many a times you'll see that if the family unit is not strong, the discipline problems will also be more explicit and so on. What do we do? Do we then go back and say, hey, let us rather teach the teachers to fight? You'd recall that when we had the NEEC, was it the NECC? Is it the NECC? Actually, when Bontate Mutlana and the others were talking about stopping this corporal punishment, they were also thinking about us as teachers. We are outnumbered. If we actually want to go to school and clap all those children, we be careful, they will actually beat us up. We are not that strong. Our children think, my child, for instance, he thinks I can beat everybody. And that's why I never start a fight, because I want him to stay there thinking, I'm the boss, I'm the best. But the truth is, if we were to expose ourselves to a situation where we are now teaching children violence, that we can resolve problems by beating them up, I can tell you we are going to lose that battle. We will lose it. But thanks very much for this. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. There's an announcement about lunch. It does look like the other workers are waiting for us. They want to knock off. So they would want that as soon as we are done here, we must move to our area of, what is it called? Pomolong, yes, to enjoy lunch. Thank you. You have been a wonderful audience.
I think lunch it will be for 30 minutes. Now it's 12:30. We have to be back at 1 o'clock. Thank you.